Well, hey there. Welcome back to Return to Yehovah. uh, I want to do a little thing here, whatever you call these, message or something. Um, I'm calling it. It's kind of like not a warning, but like a word of encouragement or something to give a little bit of strength or courage to the brethren. Let's put it that way, because I'm calling it Be Strong, Be Brave, and Fear Not. Now, I know that there have been many warnings to God's people over the last several years. They come from messengers and prophets and regular people who have had dreams and visions, and things like that, and they all are warning us of one or another of different kinds of trials and tribulations that are coming upon America and most likely the Church of the West, all of us. Um, now, before I get into this, I remember that Moses spoke the following phrase or words to the children of Israel in Deuteronomy 31:6. It says, "Be strong and of a good courage. Do not fear nor be afraid of them, for Yehovah your God, He is the one who goes with you. He will not leave you nor forsake you." Those are words we can all hang on to. Now, obviously, it's near the end of Deuteronomy. Moses was giving them an exhortation before they were going to be going into the promised land after all these years, 40 years in the wilderness. They were finally getting ready to go in, okay? But just like you could say, as we're approaching the end times, it's been years, waiting for Messiah to return and all that. So in a way, we've been waiting for this, and you know, um, there could be some scary stuff coming up. So I want to give you guys something to think about and a reason to be encouraged and not to be afraid. Believe me, I've heard some of the same things, and yes, some sound pretty scary, and maybe we don't worry about ourselves, but we worry about our families, our loved ones, friends and neighbors. So it gives you a little bit of reason to fear. Um, so here we go. One thing, as I was thinking about this concept of trying to help each of us remember not to be afraid despite what may happen or what we might see. Most people nowadays think of Christians as meek, pale, and weak individuals. They know that when Yeshua came, he was meek and lowly. That's how it's described in the Bible. And he even told us to love our enemies and pray for those who mistreat us. Right? Somehow that has become an idea that Christians or believers in Yeshua are to just be doormats for others who want to hurt us or our families. That is not how the Bible portrays the people of God. Okay, and that's crucial to what we're going to be looking at. All the way back to Abraham. Now I could go probably further, but he's a great example right there. We think of Abraham, this little old man with a staff, and he was, living in tents and all that stuff. Wasn't he a weak old man? But actually, when you think about it, not even close. Have you not heard what he did? There was a group of kings that went to war against another group, and they attacked a city where Abraham's nephew Lot was living at the time. The bad guys, conquered the city, captured Lot and his family and all their belongings, plus the belongings and people, from that city. I don't know how many there were, but a bunch of them. And they carted them off, taking them back to their land as prisoners, and all the booty from the battle. But according to Scripture, Abraham gathered up men that he had, and he went after them. And the Bible describes it as a slaughter. he went and rescued Lot and the rest of the captives and all their belongings. Okay, now I was going to read that. I did notice that different versions of the Bible don't use the term slaughter, but I think it was the King James. It talks about later how he met the king of Sodom, who was one of the ones that lost the battle, and then later Melchizedek. He met him, but it said after the slaughter of the kings, you know. So anyhow, I didn't want to spend too much time on that, although very interesting story. You can look at Genesis 14 to read, you know, more about that. But then if we move forward in time, what about Moses? Now, he is actually called meek. I mean, it describes him as a very meek man above all other men, or something like that. And I think what it is, in our language, that sounds like very, you know, timid, mild-mannered, or whatever. But when you look at the word itself, and I'm not getting into a Hebrew lesson, but it actually means humble. And I know other translations, you know, put it that way, that Moses was more humble than any other man. And that just meant he didn't think of himself better than other people or whatever. He, you know, he was honest about who he was and his failings and all, and he wasn't, you know, one to boast and, you know, proud and arrogant and all that. He just wasn't that way. But he went from being a shepherd in Midian to all of a sudden facing off against the mightiest king in the greatest nation on the earth at the time, arguably. He could have been killed many times for defying Pharaoh, but he wasn't, because Jehovah was with him. And for that story, you could just read the book of Exodus. You see all the interactions he had back and forth with Pharaoh. And I mean, I've thought about that several times. It's like, man, not many kings would put up with him, you know, making demands or whatever, but that was the way, you know, God wanted it to work out. We can fast forward a little bit. Then there's Joshua and Caleb. You think those men were weak? First, they were 2 of the 12 spies that were sent into the land of Canaan to check out the land before they were going to go in and conquer the promised land. They wanted to, you know, get an idea of what it looked like and what the people were like, and, you know, just normal reconnaissance, we would call it. Well, after they came back, 10 of the group all were like, oh, it's horrible, you know, we're going to die. These people are like giants to us, and, you know, the land eats the people up and all this stuff. But Joshua and Caleb, in the midst of, you know, the majority of the camp going against what they were saying, they were like, no, we can definitely take them. If God's on our side, we got nothing to fear, you know. And they were trying to, you know, get the people to see the reality. But of course, people grumbled, they got nervous, they got scared or whatever, and they believed all the scary stuff, you know, that these other 10 men were saying. So they doubted God. They wanted to go back to Egypt. So he punished them with 40 years of wandering in the wilderness. And then all of the ones that were, you know, old enough to have gone into battle then, I think it was, you know, 20 years and older, all died in the wilderness over that 40-year time. So, but we do know that Joshua later went on to be the leader of the Israelite army, and he led them in many battles as they went and conquered the promised land. And Caleb was also a mighty warrior and one of Joshua's general, if not the head general. I don't know for sure. But for that whole, you know, set of adventures, just read the book of Joshua in the Bible. And then next we come to the book of Judges. Now this, you know, this is a cool book because it's like a list of the, almost you might call the who's of biblical heroes or warriors. But these guys were like fighters, is what I'm saying. Not just like a man of great faith, but they were, you know, warriors. Everybody's heard of Gideon, you know, and that's in the books, or the book of Judges, chapter 6 through 8. It's, well, at one point, Gideon was going to go against the Midianites and the Amalekites, and it says they were down in this valley, and as he went down to kind of check it out, they were as numerous as locusts, and their camels were without number. as the sand by the seashore in multitude. So there was thousands of these guys, all getting ready to attack or go to battle with Israel. Well, Gideon, he was only allowed to take 300 men. Literally whittled the numbers down to just 300 men, because God wanted them to see that it was him that gave them the victory, not their sheer numbers and might and all that. Okay, and I made a note here, they were the original 300. I mean, there was a movie made, and the stories of the Spartans, you probably have heard those, went against the Persian army and all that stuff. And anyhow, the Spartans were supposed to be these incredible warriors and all that. But before them, there was Gideon and the Hebrew 300. Anyhow, so if you have you want to see what that's all about, and what kind of guy he was, read Judges 6 through 8. Then there's a guy a lot of people have never heard of, but if you read the Torah and the Tanakh, you know who he is. His name is Jephthah, and he was, well, he's just called a mighty man of valor. I won't go into all the stuff, but he was basically like the bastard son. Well, he was the son of a harlot, let's put it that way. His mother was a harlot, and even though he was born into this one tribe or whatever, the people wanted nothing to do with him, so he ended up living away from them. But he became a mighty warrior, and had men that banded together with him, and so I don't know what all they did in their fighting, but one day when they needed help, they went running to Jephthah and asked him to come and fight for them against their enemies. So eventually he did, and you can read about that. He's talked about in Judges chapter 11 all the way through chapter 12 verse 7. Okay. Then one of my favorite characters is Samson. Everybody's heard of this guy. I mean, there's been movies made about him and cartoons and everything else, but in the book of Judges from chapter 13 through 16, just all that God did. I mean, even that his miraculous announcing of his birth and all that kind of stuff, definitely a picture of like a foretelling of like what the Messiah was going to be like and that kind of thing. Just a picture of that, but that's for another day. Anyhow, to show what kind of guy he was and how tough he was and strong he was, he once killed 1,000 Philistine soldiers with nothing but the jawbone of an ass. Now, I'm sure you've all heard that, but it says in the Judges 15:14, it said the Philistines came shouting against him, like, "Ah, let's get him," or whatever. And then the Spirit of Yehovah came mightily upon Samson, and he had been tied up by his own people. They were going to turn him in, and the ropes that he was tied with became like flax that was burned with fire, and he just went, broke them easily, and they fell loose from his hands. And then he found this fresh jawbone of a donkey and grabbed it and ended up killing 1,000 men with it. I mean, that's pretty incredible. But just remember, these are people that are, biblical characters that did mighty deeds and were strong, brave, courageous people of God. They didn't just live among the Israelites and happen to be, brave or strong or whatever. Okay? There's the connection to the God of Israel. And then there was David, the son of Jesse. He went against a giant of a man when the entire Israelite army was scared to death. David killed the giant guy and went on to win many battles. He was a mighty warrior and a mighty king. And for that story, you can look at 1 Samuel chapter 17. Obviously, there's a lot of chapters about David, but the one about David against the giant Goliath is 1 Samuel 17. I think everybody has heard the stories of David. And less people have heard about, but a lot of you know, David had a small group of mighty men. I think there was 30 of them. And these guys are incredible. I mean, you read the stories. They're in 2 Samuel 23, and it may be some other places, but that's where they're kind of listed and saying what their acts, the things they had done. But my gosh, I mean, some of these guys, just incredible warriors, okay? But they were loyal to David the king, and they would do anything for him and that kind of thing. So, um, again, just part of all the examples in the Bible of brave, courageous men and or women. And just because I'm not listing any women right now, their bravery and things like that were in different, different parts. And, this is not an exhaustive list, okay? Now we're going to move a little bit forward to Daniel and the three young men. Their names were changed to Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And between Daniel being thrown into a den of hungry lions and the three young men being thrown into a fiery furnace, these guys faced some of the most horrific punishments imaginable. And it was all because they would not do as a pagan king wanted them to do, either, not praying to God or bowing down to a golden idol and all that stuff, because they knew the Torah said, do not do those things. Love Yehovah your God and do not do those things. So they refused to do them. They stood firm for Yehovah and his ways, and in their case, he saved them. You can read about that in Daniel chapter 3 and then also chapter 6, two separate events. Well, I could go on and on. Your Bible is full of brave men and women, and believers down through the ages have been imprisoned, tortured, and seen all kinds of horrible deaths. These men and women were not cowards, okay? They stood firm for God no matter what. To me, these are the epitome of courage, and that is your lineage. That is your history. And it may very well be your destiny, okay? When I say that, if you stand strong in your faith, you have nothing to fear. Yes, you may be killed or imprisoned or tortured, but you got to remember, you're no different than anybody else. And I'm sorry, but American Christians or Western Christians don't have any, better, we aren't more holy than the believers in China and Vietnam and the Middle East and all other places, that have been, through all these, same problems, okay? Of course, nobody wishes to go through those kind of things, but I'm here to tell you that you can be strong, okay? Think of these great heroes of the faith that I just read some of, and as you go through the Bible, come up with your own. There's plenty of others. But I like to think of it as they are watching us from heaven's bleachers, like people on a Friday night football game or whatever, watching the teams play, They know the reward, and they are cheering for us. I'm not saying that this is the end for any of us. No way. God has plans for this world and for his people. And one thing we need to remember, if we hold out until the end, we might just get to see Yeshua coming on the clouds with the armies of heaven. My God, just imagine that. Either way, our side wins. Okay? So I'm going to end it here, but just something I want you guys to think about, and just remember those when, that's why we're given those examples in the Bible, is so we can learn from them and remember them. And if you're going through a horrible time someday, just think back to one or more of these, incredible, heroic people, and just know, all right, they did it. It may hurt, but I'm going to do it too, okay? So, anyhow, I'm going to close for now, but Yehovah bless you and keep you. Shalom.